Hi, so my name is Muyiwa Oyinlola. I'm a reader in Engineering for Sustainable Development, and I also serve as the director of the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development.
Can you talk a bit about your experience?
So basically, my research, I've been here for about 7 years, and my research is in the broad area of engineering and sustainable development. Looking at ways to promote sustainable development using engineering technologies, and one big area of that has been the circular economy. So I've been looking at how to promote circular economy in the global south with focus on sub-Saharan Africa. So having done a few projects. One was the bottle house where we used plastic bottles to build a house in Nigeria. We've had the circular plastic where we've helped local communities to convert plastic um, waste into filaments for 3D printing. And then, we've had building capacity for the circular economy. Just a few different projects. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. How did all of this came up? How did you get into this?
So basically, my background is in mechanical engineering. So I did a PhD in heat and mass transfer of solar thermal collectors, but I've been interested in the broad area of sustainable development. I guess my my journey into plastics was when we did the bottle house. So that was plastic bottles, using that for building houses. Um, so my what I was interested in then was the heat transfer, trying to see how they can be better thermal performance and the likes. However, that just brought me into plastics in terms of seeing how we can make them more sustainable and cool. Yeah, so I guess that's how I got into that.
Mhm.
Both, yeah.
From your experience, what would be your suggestions or things that if you were to start your career again, you would do different, for example?
Okay, so in terms of career, I think my first advice is to do something that you are really passionate about. Um, because it's a long journey, especially if you're going to academia. You need to do something you're passionate about, something you that interests you. Because it can get boring, it can get monotonous, it can maybe not, but you need to do something that you are committed to, so that you have the fire burning all through. I think that's my advice. And then number two, once you get something that you're happy with, you stick with it, you commit to it. Yep.
Why you choose this career and particularly what did interest you in what you are doing?
I think there are two parts to that career. That question? Why did I choose a career in academia? Um, I think academia gives you an opportunity, especially when you're doing research, to contribute to society. In other words, how do you make society better? How do you use research to enhance living conditions of people? So that's part of what drove me into academia. Both my parents are professors, so it was a natural um, um, progression path. But again, why did I choose the my area in sustainability? Is because of my so I'm from Nigeria originally, and it's a developing country. Generally, Africa is developing, so I wanted a career that could contribute to accelerating that development. So how do I ensure that I contribute to ensuring that the continent um, progresses? So that's why I have a career in sustainability generally.
So, in all of your journey until today, is there something that surprised you or something that you didn't expect when you were starting?
So I guess And most things are, well, you don't know exactly how things will pan out, you don't know what will happen. So that's the thing, I think that's the beauty of academia. You don't know. Um, yeah, so in terms of what has surprised me, I'm not sure exactly if there's anything I really expected, because again, you go in, you're not sure if you get a grant, you're not sure what direction you will go. So I guess every day can be a surprise, and I think that's one of the beauties of academia. You just go with the flow. You are flexible enough to respond to situations.
Can you talk about some of your most recent research?
So I'm doing quite a few research together. So one of the ones that was quite proud of is, well, proud of most of them, is the Ditch Plastic one, which was digital innovations for transition into a circular economy in Africa. And so with that project, what we did was, it was a multidisciplinary project. We had partners from like 5, 6 different countries. It's multi-sectoral, academia, NGOs, so university and then businesses. Okay, and what we're trying to do is just trying to see how we could accelerate the transition to a circular plastic economy in Africa using digital innovations. So that this people are using digital tools and technologies across the continent, but everyone is doing it in silos. So we were trying to look at a strategic way to make sure these people can work together and be more or less how they can enhance and make sure that this progresses. So that's one. So quite proud of that one, especially because of the impact that we've been able to do. I think one of the novel things is that there's been a lot of talk about circular economy and everything. However, I think what's happened is it's top down. So we were able to engage with over 1,500 households across 5 countries to just understand what's the average man, an average woman is interested in. What do they understand by circular economy? What are their drivers? What are their challenges? Yeah, so that's one of the things that we've done.
Why is plastic a much bigger and complex problem that people might think? And also how it does really affect some African countries.
Um, so plastics are a big challenge. Well, I don't need to say that. I'm sure everyone knows that from different materials, David Attenborough and co. But what is a bit more challenging in the African context is that the infrastructure for waste collection and co is not available. So what happens is that you find plastics waste and co in drainages, in oceans, in seas. So it's a bit more pronounced because it's openly dumped or burnt, and either animals and co ingest them. So plastics find their way to the food chain. Sometimes incinerated with not properly, so you have pollution. So you have all that. So I think that's one of the reasons, the main reason that it will be more significant in Africa is because of the lack of infrastructure to manage waste properly.
Mhm. Some of this plastic in the circular economy can be used for building houses, more infrastructure. Could you share more about this? How that would be applied, for example?
Plastics have been used for different things. People are always trying to find innovative ways to use plastics. People use it for furniture. People use it for buildings. You can convert it to 3D printed products, and then so you have different ways. So it just depends. Again, when we talk about plastics, there are a wide range of plastics. You have high density polyethylene, low density you have PET, you have you have just polystyrene, you have loads and loads. So it depends on the type of plastic we are referring to. But generally, I think it's just about that innovative way people use to, let's say, upcycle plastic. So, what can you use? Because the main thing is that plastics don't degrade easily. So, yeah, it's better to try to upcycle them, and that's lower environmental footprint than having to go to recycle. Yeah.
We are solving two issues with plastic, the recycling side and the material side for construction. But is there other ways to solve this?
So basically, we have so we're working on the circular economy, okay? And so what we find generally, what people are focusing on is recycling. However, when you think about um, the circular economy, first and foremost, how do we even stop or reduce our use of plastics? Okay, so how do we reduce that? So, do we need plastics in everything? So that's the first thing. Okay, and then also that is not just from, so that can be both from the production to the use. Okay, so how do you upstream? How do you reduce plastic? Secondly, then you talk about reusing. Okay, so how do you, is it single? Why should it be single use? Can it be used for multiple times? So you have those up further up the chain, and so I think there should be more emphasis on those parts, so that yeah, we, before we start talking about reusing and trying to get innovative ways to, so how do we eliminate it up downstream first?
So, in most or some of your projects and research, you have worked with other people from multidisciplinary perspectives. Why you think it's important to have a multidisciplinary perspectives, and also do you think it can be detrimental?
Um, so I think, well, having a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral team is very important, um, because it's one thing to have a technical solution, but you have to remember that a technical solution that is not, that people have to use still um, is dependent on how people use it. So if I make lights more efficient or whatever, and if somebody decides to leave the lights on all through, it's still not, doesn't achieve the objective, isn't it? So again, you have to have that balance. You have to have the social, you have to have the technical, and everything. So again, looking at projects, so if you think about what happens in Africa, you find out that people just come, have these very lofty projects, do it and go, and then a few months later they're broken down. And that's because one of the things is that it's an imported design. It's people there don't have the stake in it, so they don't have ownership. So what we're saying is, yeah, from a multi perspective, you can address most of all these things and make sure that you have different people working together, so you have a solution that is fit for purpose. So it's bespoke. It's important to bring different disciplines, and so that you know what you're doing has a higher chance of success. In terms of it being detrimental, I think if it's planned properly, there should be no issues. The main issues is sometimes people work in silos, even if they're working on some project, they're working in silos, so things don't fit. But basically, with a proper manager or director, you can make sure that works well.
You are trying to apply net zero in Africa. Since Africa it's a different context than Europe, for example, how would you translate net zero to Africa?
Um, so there are two ways to answer that. There are two answers to, well, let's say there are two things to consider for Africa in terms of net zero. So number one is that if we think about Africa, it's still developing. So what that means is that several sectors can leapfrog. So Africa doesn't have to go through the trajectory that the Western developed countries have. So they have opportunities to invest in more technologies and code that will lead to net zero. So I think it's an advantage there in terms of that. Having said that, from an individual perspective, if you think about people in Africa, most of them, their number one priority is how to survive. They need food, they need shelter, okay? Majority of them, because majority of them live below the poverty line. And so, um, it can be a bit more difficult to get people to even think about environmental issues and net zero and go. So, again, people will look for the cheapest way to survive and the most efficient way. So, I think those are the two, will I say, things that we'll talk about when you think about net zero in an African context. Okay, so I think part of my research is what I'm quite keen about is building capacity. So it's not just about developing solutions. That's one thing, and that there are loads of solutions. I think what is very important is being able to build capacity in Africa to be able to develop solutions. So that's what I'm quite keen on in terms of my research, just so that yeah, you can have a sustainable solution rather than we just going there with one thing and coming out.